Hello, thank you for choosing to tune in for our educational segment of Die for the Die. Our cast members cover various topics ranging from art to calculus, but today we'll be covering something that we have put tons of research and time into: Jared Diamond's theories about the causes and effects of global inequality. Jared Diamond is a man who is very intelligent and vows to solve his theories. One of his theories involved global inequality and what causes and effects that are here in the world because of it. In this episode, we will explain more about his theory, specifically how different factors are important to this topic. I'll now hand it over to our teacher of the group, Pumpkin, to explain our first factor. Thank you, Cereal Box. As they stated earlier, there are many factors connected to global inequality, one of them being the domestication of plants and animals. There are many animals that have been domesticated all over the world, some of them being animals such as horses, goats, sheep, pigs, and cows, though there are many more. Plants that have been domesticated and grown are plants such as cotton, sugarcane, wheat, tomatoes, and more. Though plants were also important during the triangular trade connected to global inequality, animals played a larger role. An example of the domestication of animals having a role in global inequality is when the Spanish were invading the Incan Empire. They brought horses to assist them in their goal. However, horses are not native to the Americas, so the Inca were confused and frightened at the sight of people riding on horseback and weren't sure how to fight back. Another example of this is the materials people get from domesticating animals. Certain animals can give humans things such as constant meat and milk supply, hair and skin that can be used for warmth, fertilizer made up of their dung, and forms of transportation. Plants such as wheat and barley can be reused every harvest season by simply replanting the seeds. This causes farmers to get both bigger and better results with their crops. Whew, all that talking makes my mouth hurt. I think I'll switch it over to one of our other members. Hey, it's time for another factor related to global inequality: geography. It's probably one of the more major factors that will be explained in this video, as one of Diamond's largest factors in his theory was just that. Geography shapes our planet, how it is shaped, formed, and how things interact with each other. Since different places have different animals, climates, and cultures, they are bound to experience things in varying ways, have access to different things, and have had different experiences. An example of this is how people living in Zambia protect themselves from disease. Zambians need to protect themselves from two major illnesses: smallpox and malaria. Malaria is a disease that is more based on geography in terms of protecting themselves between the two. Malaria is a disease with very high fatality that is spread by mosquitoes. People in countries such as Zambia can protect themselves from the risk of living near mosquitoes by living in higher and drier communities. Mosquitoes typically live low to the ground and near hot, wet places, and by building communities away from those spaces, people have a much higher chance of not contracting the disease. Geography also plays a part in how they protect themselves from smallpox as well. Smallpox is a disease that is actually native to Africa, which means that the people there are familiar with it. Over time, they have built up the resistance to the disease, along with their cattle also building immunity. Both diseases have caused citizens to look for a cure or a protection because of their severity, and they have, in fact, been successful. They created vaccinations for smallpox and antibodies for malaria. I'll hand it over to PC to explain further about geography.
Thank you, Arrow. I think I'm the perfect person to cover this, actually. Just look at my face. Anyway, another example as to why geography is so important to Jared Diamond's theory. When Europeans went to invade Africa, usually when you think of countries invading other countries, you think of the invaders being strong and powerful, always being successful no matter what in their journeys. However, this is not the case. When Europeans started to trek to take over tropical areas of Africa, they were not used to the climate. In other words, they were not native to the land like the other inhabitants there were. So as they continued, they had started to die off. They had encountered germs where they were not accustomed to. And not only did it kill off the European soldiers, it also killed off the livestock they brought along with them. This was, of course, tragic, but it does help explain how geography can affect people in many different ways. Now, moving on to the main topics of this episode: guns, germs, and steel.
Why do I have to do it?
Because you're a police officer.
Fine. Sorry. Moving on. Guns, a major part of modern-day technology. In fact, I am quite experienced with them since I am a former officer myself. I don't think we could function without them now. back in the time where the events such as the triangular trade were occurring, they were still only a few centuries old, so not everyone was familiar with the power they hold. Back to a topic that has already been covered, but I will add more detail onto, the Spanish invasion of the Incan Empire. Along with their horses, they also brought along guns. Since the Americas had no contact with the Eastern world at the time, they had no idea that guns even existed. Unfortunate for them, because they didn't know what the hell they were dealing with. The Spanish had also brought along a large army, which definitely caused the Inca to be severely outnumbered. Imagine being faced against an army you have no chance of defeating, who were armed with technology you didn't even know existed until then. You would be, to put in simple terms, screwed.
This is very unfortunate casting for this subject because I am very much a neat freak.
Germs. An abomination to society. Disgusting, destructive, and microscopic. Oh, don't mind me.
Back during the triangular trade, germs were probably the most destructive thing one could come across. We have already discussed them thoroughly, but I will, unfortunately, need to elaborate. In the time when Africa was invaded by Europe, Europeans discovered that Africa had materials they didn't have back at home. However, they still wanted to use the African people as slaves. So, as a solution, the Europeans simply moved the Africans closer to mines and places they could get materials from. Though it may not seem like that big of a problem, this actually ruined the natives' way of life. They had formerly formed civilizations far away from one another prevent I can't even talk because of this, prevent the spread of disease. And being suddenly grouped together in a new cramped civilization, it ruined the way they had lived for centuries completely. Flash forwarding to modern day times, disease still impacts Africa immensely. In Zambia, they are still fighting against diseases, especially malaria. Malaria primarily impacts children under the age of 5, though it can but rarely affect people older than that. When Jared Diamond visited a hospital in Zambia, he saw that many children were laying in bed ill, surrounded by parents who were not working simply to be there for their kids as they lay there, pretty much destined to pass away. Since parents are staying with their children and unable to work, poverty has struck many families, and they are unable to pay for the kids' treatment as well. Along with many adults not being able to work, that has caused the net growth in Africa to be going up by negative 1% each year. That is not positive growth, so the countries are often struggling. Well, that's all I have to say on this topic. I think I'm done talking about this now.
The final topic we will be discussing that connects to Jared Diamond's theory about the causes and effects of global inequality is steel. Although, I don't need an introduction. I think it's pretty obvious who I am.
Introduce yourself, turd.
Fine. Sorry. I'm Heptagon. I don't need an introduction because I am very clearly a 7-sided shape. Is that so difficult to figure out, Shady? Although steel may not seem like a mind-blowing subject in global inequality, you would be right. It was, however, still important. For example, a long time ago, the Spanish were looking for materials to make weapons. Prior to their discovery, they had been using materials such as bronze or iron in order to make their weapons, such as swords. The issue was that those materials were soft and fragile, not quite strong enough to make swords. However, geography came into play when they had upgraded to a new material. Due to the location of their country, they had learned how to make swords, since that is something that was being produced from their area. Knowing this, they decided to try to make a stronger material that could withstand violent battle easier. With some experimenting, they eventually discovered that combining iron with small parts of carbon makes a stronger material, which we now know as steel. Because of their knowledge and discovery, their weapons became stronger than other weapons, and that assisted them in future battle. They had continued to use steel swords, also known as the arquebus, for many years in the future, until they soon upgraded their technology guns. All of the factors covered in this episode have all somehow contributed to global inequality, one way or another. On to the second segment, as if us here at Die for the Die agree with Diamond's theory. Wow, I'm surprised you all stayed tuned in far enough to get here. Well, thank you. Or maybe you just sped ahead to see me. Get on with it. Sorry. Now, do we at Die for the Die agree with Jared Diamond's theory? Yes, we do. We think that he put extensive amounts of effort and thought into proving the causes and effects of global inequality. One of the strongest that we personally agree with is how much geography played a role in how the world began to shape and form after countries began to conquer each other. For example, people in Europe wouldn't have the same diseases as people in Africa because of the vastly different climates, and how some bacteria may be able to live in some climates and not others. So when Europeans were able to invade a place such as Africa, they were introduced to diseases that they had no protection against, and the same happened with Europeans giving off diseases to Africans. We also believe that his theory of the causes and effects of global inequality being connected to the geography is also great, because some places will have access to materials that do not exist in other areas around the globe. Places that have access to more materials would, in theory, be more successful, wealthy, and stronger nations, just how Jared Diamond says it works. And that concludes our episode on Diamond's theory about the causes and effects of global inequality and the factors that support it: domestication of plants, animals, geography, gardens, germs, and steel. Thank you for deciding to choose in for this episode, and we'll see you all next time.